As the Fire Emblem series continues to evolve with each entry in the series, it starts to lose more and more of its uncomfortable design sensibilities to perpetuate a series of tropes in its game design. A lot could be said about those tropes which gave the series one last gasp of relevance, but I want to hone in on an element which plagues RPGs as a whole. That being, the boring toil of menu-based battles, leading players to ultimately disengage with gameplay, and developers to mesh two opposing genres in an attempt to make gameplay more engaging. To get more specific pertaining to SRPGs, the issue of player tactics circumventing enemy design completely through turtling, which I think made unit skills play more of a pivotal role in subsequent entries. Turtling refers to moving a unit within a single enemy's range to pull that enemy from their group into your group, then proceeding to defeat that enemy in any manner you wish. High HP enemies get devoured by every unit on the player's side, while weaker ones are used for EXP fodder without resistance. Normally players keep all of their units grouped up to make themselves simultaneously unstoppable and immovable up to reaching the boss of the map. The enemy AI can only be so intelligent, and in order to keep a sense of balance, most enemies only move when the player's unit is in range. There are a limited number of enemies that pursue the player directly, and once they're killed, the player has the rest of the map in the palm of their hand. From then on, it's not a matter of if the player would complete the map, but rather when. Although the issue had been remedied in the very first game, a band-aid in the form of the Thief class. This class is the only class that can open treasure chests, which contains some of the most useful items in the game or at that given chapter. Besides Cavaliers, they have the second highest moveset in the game, yet low stats given for combat. They steal things, but unlike their typical turn-based counterpart, what they do uniquely in a top-down setting is pressure the player by sealing the treasure chest the player wants first and foremost within a given map. When supplies are scarce, collecting resources becomes a primary objective in the player's mind, perhaps even above just completing the map, and that is because one wrong move can quickly snowball into losing the game much earlier than if they hadn't used up their stronger weapons or potions. The Thief class breaks turtling tactics by turning the map into a race, with the finish line being a specific point of the map. Players have to intercept the thief or collect the treasure chest before they do. The player must throw caution to the wind for the highest reward because there's no telling what challenge the game will throw at them on the next chapter, at least on blind playthroughs. Of course, this isn't a one-size-fits-all solution to design. Arcania would have a bigger problem than war if every map had thieves all over. But as the Fire Emblem series progressed from 1 through 4, there was experimentation done to add a variety of ways the enemy could, in a sense, counter the player. With FE4 borrowing elements from the real-time strategy genre, giving the player bases they had to defend while also bases they had to capture. Only that here there are a very finite amount of units the player is able to control, so for the less experienced, losing a castle was a very real possibility, especially since now any unit can capture these key points. In my opinion, Thracia 776 goes the furthest with the role of the thief. Gameplay was reverted back to how it was present in Mystery of the Emblem, while also building upon lessons learned in Genealogy of the Holy War. While Thracia still has thieves, their role was more delegated towards the enemy-exclusive bandit class, and the game places more of an importance on treasure keys, which allows any unit to open treasure chests. The latter emphasizes the player's scarcity of resources, while the former constantly threatens the player with power in numbers. Because of this change in dynamics, it isn't just the bandit class that pressures the player into moving. Some enemies that hold treasure keys will open chests and use their contents against the player, simultaneously wasting the player's resources while also making themselves more threatening during active gameplay. This tips the scale of player versus enemy combat disparity more towards the enemy, which is good in order to continually present constant and new challenges where one strategy can't solve all. Furthermore, Thracia's capture system turns every enemy encountered into a potential thief, and your units as a treasure chest you have to protect. The usual turtling strategy is flipped on itself to keep the player pressured on their toes. Players that dig their heels in the dirt will only be slowed down and caught by eventual reinforcement spawns, or cause you to lose out on that magic tome, which would really be handy right now rather than later. The congestion of the player's units inherently becomes a hindrance. Suddenly all your guys are on the way of each other, and strong units can't properly move into place because the healer was used and is in the way of a good spot to block off a weakness in positioning. This change expands the player's secondary objective more than simply racing towards an imaginary finish line. The balance of power over the map is kept shifting up until the final few enemies and boss. However, with eternal affairs and modernization, this design was suddenly dropped in favor of simplicity. Given that the series shrunk to being able to fit in your pocket, some concessions had to be made. Dynamics between player and enemy reverts back to only being the thief acting as the pressure for the player, and essentially nothing else. This problem of leading player versus enemy disparity more towards the player persists throughout the rest of the series, challenging the player through inflated stats rather than knowledge puzzles. The role of the thief doesn't always have to be a persistent character archetype. Super Robot Wars original generation solves the turtling problem in a manner I much prefer. The appeal of this series isn't just giant robots and awesome animations, but also the usage of a system called Battle Masteries. Battle Masteries are a secondary objective on top of a primary objective for the player to achieve, and these secondary objectives aren't simplicities such as survive for a certain amount of turns, or talk to a specific unit, but rather uncomfortable contrivances. Get across the map in 3 turns and fight the boss, or get the boss down to a certain percentage of HP. But to get to the boss, you must first face a ton of enemies. The reason I use the word contrivances is because these objectives require the player to give up their position of power, willingly giving more of an advantage to the enemy through extreme risk in order to complete these challenges. Rather than difficulty being arbitrarily inflated stats and numbers, it is left in the player's hands, asking you to put yourself in an estranged position and leaving it to you to figure out how to get out of that position. Battle Masteries demand mastery, and through that the player learns more about the game beyond its surface appeal. Some of the best items are locked behind these Battle Masteries, and in some cases, the game's true ending. However, I believe they shouldn't be viewed as a one and done deal, as in, get the Battle Mastery for that chapter to get the item and never touch them again. Super Robot Wars has less consequences for losing a unit, so the risk is encouraged. Like Doracia 776, there's a push and pull between the player and enemy, but I feel Super Robot Wars is more subtle with how it challenges the player to push beyond their comfort zone. Regardless of which one is preferred, both games do an excellent job of getting the player to understand the game and higher appreciation of the game through mastery of its mechanics. Borrowing elements from its sister genre, real-time strategy RPG gameplay expands and becomes better as opposed to trying to actionify design. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to drop a like. Share a comment too if you have some thoughts on this as well. If you ever feel so inclined to see more of me or my works, then follow me on Twitter or donate to my Ko-fi page. Supporting the channel in any way you can will help a lot. Thank you for watching.